Pan Dems invite pro-establishment lawmakers to team up against changes to eligibility age for elderly welfare applicants. Donald Trump on a tour of the U.S. border with Mexico. And in Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro sworn in for a second presidential term amid protests by the opposition.
Hello, good evening. In a rare gesture, Pan Democrats have extended a sincere invitation to pro-establishment lawmakers. Both camps may team up against Chief Executive Carrie Lam over a controversial age limit for the elderly welfare. People say in politics there are no permanent enemies. That might just be true.
We are now extending a sincere invitation to the pro-establishment camp. The government must, should, and will scrap this new age limit on a welfare payout for the elderly, or we will all consider voting against the upcoming budget.
The chief executive probably wasn't expecting this when she made this comment yesterday.
I wonder whether you remember this, to lift the age limit of elderly CSSA recipients from 60 to 65. That was approved by you.
By voting yes to last year's budget estimates, legislators also agreed to raise the eligible age for elderly comprehensive social security assistance applicants. That was mentioned in brief in a document of over 900 pages. Pro-establishment lawmakers insist they oppose the new age limit, even though they support the overall budget. We haven't ruled out any cooperation across political groups because this is a livelihood issue, said DAB's Leung Chi-cheung. The city's largest pro-establishment party has urged the government to take remedial action, even though Carrie Lam already said she will not halt the age adjustment effective next month. The new rule excludes those who are 60 to 64 years old from a welfare payment that's higher than the benefit currently offered to able-bodied CSSA recipients aged below 60.
A chief executive in council has accepted a proposed hike in the statutory minimum wage to $37.50 an hour. If approved by the legislature, the new rate will go into effect on May 1st. Sharon Tang has more.
An announcement concerning Hong Kong's low-wage workers. The chief executive in council has accepted a recommendation from the Minimum Wage Commission. The proposal calls for the statutory minimum wage to be increased to $37.50 an hour, $3 higher than the current rate. It will be the fourth increase in the city's statutory minimum wage since 2011. And the $3 hike will be the biggest increase in a single adjustment during the past 8 years, resulting in a 34% cumulative rate of increase. Legislators have different opinions on the issue. Luk Chung-hung, who represents the labour sector, said the rise is acceptable as it's an above-inflation increase. He added that giving out wages is a necessary cost for business owners. Catering services lawmaker Tommy Cheung said when there's a shortage of manpower, market forces would naturally push up wages. But he accused the authorities of failing to take into consideration the commercial sector's concerns by making the increase compulsory through legislation. The statutory minimum wage increase will be gazetted next Friday and be tabled at the Legislative Council the following Wednesday. Once it's approved, the new hourly rate will take effect on the 1st of May. Sharon Tang, TVB News.
In a week's time, male employees in Hong Kong will be able to enjoy 5 days of paternity leave, 2 more than the current 3. One of the conditions is that their children must be born on or after January 18th this year. Those employed under continuous contracts will be entitled to the extended leave if they have notified their bosses 3 months in advance. An amendment to the employment ordinance boosting the statutory paternity leave will take effect next Friday.
Elsewhere, U.S. President Donald Trump is edging closer to declaring a national emergency to get the $5.7 billion he's seeking to build a long-promised wall on the border with Mexico. This comes as a partial government shutdown nears becoming the longest in U.S. history. Alan Booknia reports.
Trump made a visit to a town in Texas near the Mexican border where he was flanked by border agents who are going without paychecks during the shutdown. Trump again brought up the possibility of bypassing the Democrat-controlled Congress, which is blocking funding for the wall.
If for any reason we don't get this going and they're not going to act responsibly and they don't mind death and crime and all of the problems that they cause by not having a barrier, then you will see what happens with national emergency, which I can do very easily.
Trump also visited the border town of McAllen, Texas. There, he addressed an argument of the Democrats who say a wall is an ineffective and outdated way to answer a complex problem.
They say a wall is medieval. Well, so is a wheel. A wheel is older than a wall. And I looked at every single car out there, even the really expensive ones that the Secret Service uses, and believe me, they are expensive. I said, do they all have wheels? Yes. Oh.
In Washington, Democrat House Speaker Nancy Pelosi called Wednesday's White House meeting between Trump and congressional leaders a soap opera. It ended after just minutes when Trump walked out.
I think the meeting was a setup so he could walk out.
On the 20th day of the federal shutdown, unions staged rallies in Washington to draw attention to federal employees' plight. They disagree with Trump's assertion that his stance has widespread support among federal workers.
And let's call this shutdown what it is. It's a lockout. Hard-working American patriots are being locked out of their job for no reason other than the politics of fear. Shame on the Senate, shame on the White House. This lockout has to end, and it has to end now.
If the partial government shutdown lasts until Saturday, it will become the longest in U.S. history. Alan Booknia, TVB News.
U.S. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin says Chinese Vice Premier Liu He will likely visit Washington later this month for more trade talks. This comes just days after the U.S. trade delegation returned from similar talks in Beijing, raising hopes that both sides can resolve their ongoing trade dispute.
The current intent is that the Vice Premier Liu He will most likely come and visit us later in the month. And I would expect that the government shutdown would have no impact. We will continue with those meetings, just as we sent a delegation to China.
Authorities in Poland have arrested a Huawei employee over spying allegations. Polish television reported that Huawei's sales director, a Chinese national, was arrested on Tuesday by the country's internal security agency. Also arrested in the same operation was a former Polish security agent who recently worked for Orange Polska. Authorities also searched and seized documents at the offices of Huawei and Orange. Huawei says it is aware of the arrest and insists its employees abide by the laws in the countries where they are based.
British lawmakers continue to battle over Brexit ahead of a vote next week. Parliament has already made things more difficult for Prime Minister Theresa May, who is urging lawmakers to approve her deal with the EU or face a no-deal Brexit. The House of Commons voted Wednesday to prevent the government from postponing key decisions as Brexit approaches. They also approved a motion that gives May just 3 days to come up with a Plan B if her deal is rejected. Opposition Labour Party leader Jeremy Corbyn says he will demand fresh elections if Parliament rejects May's Brexit deal and may possibly press for a second referendum.
If the government cannot pass its most important legislation, then there must be a general election at the earliest opportunity. A government that cannot get its business through the House of Commons is no government at all. It's lost its mandate, so must go to the country to seek another. And if a general election cannot be secured, and we'll try, then we'll keep all options on the table, including the option of campaigning for a public vote.
The United States, Canada, and 17 Latin American nations have denounced the Venezuelan government as illegitimate as President Nicolas Maduro was sworn in for a second term. But with the military's backing, Maduro faces few challenges at home despite the international outcry. Jeff Tang reports.
Nicolas Maduro celebrated with what little supporters he had before he was sworn in by the country's pro-government Supreme Court. The ceremony contrasted sharply with the harsh realities that faced the former bus driver turned socialist leader, including hyperinflation, severe shortages of food and medicine, and a mass exodus of millions of citizens. After he was sworn in, Maduro took aim at the United States for leading an economic war against Venezuela. A new world has risen up that refuses to be controlled by the imperial and hegemonic orders of a single nation or its satellite countries, Maduro said. The US responded in kind, calling him an illegitimate usurper of a nation. Washington was also one of 19 members of the Organization of American States that voted not to recognize the legitimacy of Maduro's second six-year term. Paraguay went one step further and cut diplomatic ties with Venezuela. Opposition leaders have portrayed the inauguration as the moment at which Maduro will be internationally branded as a dictator. This follows a widely boycotted 2018 election that many foreign governments called a farce.
Por primera vez,
Congress Chief Juan Guaido called on the armed forces to step forward and disavow Maduro's election, which he said was not the result of a popular vote. But a coup seems unlikely, if not impossible, as Maduro continues to enjoy consistent support from the military. That was on full display following the inauguration ceremony, as Maduro visited the country's military academy, flanked by top commanders. Once among Latin America's wealthiest countries, Venezuela is enduring a historic crisis following 2 decades of socialist rule. Its citizens struggle to afford the most basic of consumer goods as inflation soars. Jeff Tang, TVB News.
In Taiwan, President Tsai Ing-wen has named a former chairman of her Democratic Progressive Party as the new premier. This follows the resignation of William Lai as the head of the Executive Yuan, along with the entire cabinet. Su Ching-chung is the newly appointed premier. The 71-year-old is a 2-term former chairman of the DPP. He also served as premier from 2006 to 2007 under the Chen Shui-bian administration. Yesterday, William Lai announced he would step down along with his cabinet 2 months after the ruling party suffered a major defeat in local elections. And still ahead tonight, the funeral of the late Catholic Bishop Michael Yeung. A report on the latest about Hong Kong's air quality.
英國殿堂級設計 Designer Collection 登陸芝曼尼，限量版小馬椅同多款抱枕等緊你，配搭自潮皮革，坐得舒服都要型。同場加映多款最新 sofa design， 但較至筍優惠，最後2日有得揀，梗係芝曼尼。
Welcome back to TVB News. The late Catholic Bishop of Hong Kong, Michael Yeung, has been laid to rest at a cemetery in Happy Valley. This morning, Catholics gathered to pray for him. As Pinky Wong reports, they also praised him for his 40 years of service in the local diocese.
The Cathedral of the Immaculate Conception on Kane Road was packed with those bidding farewell to the late Bishop Michael Yeung. Among the dignitaries attending the funeral mass were top officials, including Chief Executive Carrie Lam. Yeung passed away at the age of 73 last Thursday due to liver failure.
I'm very blessed.
Cardinal John Tong, who has been appointed the diocese acting head, presided over the funeral mass. Pope Francis also offered his condolences.
The Holy Father
was saddened to learn of the death of Bishop Michael Yeung Min Chung, and he sends heartfelt condolences to the clergy, religious, and lay faithful of the Diocese of Hong Kong. United with them in prayerful thanksgiving for Bishop Yeung's years of priestly and episcopal ministry.
It was a bitter goodbye for many that followed him.
We miss him a lot. Just through his speech and gospel, yeah. Just through his speech. It's so touching, such an amazing, loving.
Pray for us, pray for the peace, and because he's in a better place now.
Attendants of the ceremony were asked not to present flower tributes, but to keep Bishop Michael Yeung in their prayers. Yeung was laid to rest at St. Michael's Catholic Cemetery in Happy Valley. He held the second shortest tenure of 17 months as the leader of the local Catholic diocese. Pinky Wong, TVB News.
The government says there's been an improvement in the city's overall air quality over the past 5 years, but as Haley Joe reports, health-threatening issues remain.
Some good news from the Environmental Protection Department. Over the past 5 years, the concentrations of major pollutants in ambient air have gone down. But it's too early to be relieved.
At the moment, we still face two major air pollution issues. First, the roadside nitrogen dioxide levels are still very high, at around 2 times the air quality objective level. Another issue is ozone.
Ozone and nitrogen dioxide, caused mainly by fossil fuel burning power plants and road traffic, can damage your lungs and cause respiratory illnesses. Meanwhile, the city's ozone level is rising and exceeding the government limit. But what's more daunting is that the rise in our roadside ozone is more of a regional issue rather than one of our own. The problem is especially alarming in Yuen Long and Tuen Mun. The two districts failed to meet both nitrogen dioxide and ozone standards last year, and this is why.
It's mainly from the regional impact. So the impact is caused by the ozone as well as the cross-boundary PM transport. It's not just by simply tightening AQO standard could achieve an improvement in air quality.
Officials said they are working closely with their Guangdong counterparts to improve air quality by tightening emission limits and phasing out coal-based power plants, but did not provide detailed schedules. Haley Zhou, TVB News.
China's latest lunar rover has sent back the first pictures of the far side of the moon after the Chang'e 4 lunar probe made a soft landing yesterday. The Yutu-2 rover, or Jade Rabbit 2, began roaming the surface of the dark side for the first time since waking up from a scheduled nap designed to protect it from extreme heat. It is the first time in history that humans have been able to explore the far side of the moon, which always faces away from Earth. Jade Rabbit 2 is able to send images back to Earth of the moon's previously uncharted side via a relay satellite that was launched in May of 2018. The China National Space Administration is also working with Dutch, Swiss, and German scientists on the mission.
And that's the news.
Thanks for joining us.